Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today you're tuning in for a little bit of a interview or a conversation with Daniel,
Yep.
who is the designer of Badland Wolves, currently available down on Kickstarter. Link always in the top video, top of this video description. And Johnny, you're his facilitator?
My right-hand man.
Your right-hand man?
Yeah.
Is that a better way to describe it?
Yeah.
You've been there helping playtest, coordinate, organize, get everything set up. You guys are both brothers.
Yeah.
And so you've been working together to get this game to Kickstarter. Now, why are we doing an interview? Well, first off, I invited you both over to come display this game to me because some members of the Lexington, Kentucky community reached out to me letting me know that you just launched a Kickstarter project. And I was interested and excited, and I loved the art and the aesthetic of this. And you didn't have a lot of prototypes left.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a chance that if someone from my community was doing something on Kickstarter, I wanted a chance to celebrate it. But I did have a caveat when you all came over.
Yep.
That was...
And basically, it was the idea of, look, I gotta like it. If I don't, nothing will come of it.
Yeah.
And chances are nothing will come of it if it's not liked at all, period.
Well, and here's the reason being. I'm trying to build this channel in a way that is able to celebrate, highlight, encourage people to go support indie content creators. There are a lot of indie games that aren't good. Even with beautiful art, beautiful aesthetics, good ideas, there's a lot that just don't execute well. It's part of the nature of being a independent designer. In order for this channel to always have an audience that's willing to go support the content creators that we are willing to advocate for, I have to be able to sign my name to the side of it saying, if this game seems like it's right for you, I have played it and it is fun.
Right.
We've played 3 games of this tonight, one of which is on camera. There's a gameplay video that's going up. That can't do that.
I'm sorry,
You
I
can't
couldn't help
do
it.
that.
I couldn't help it.
One of which is going up. Swing over there, watch that gameplay, get a sense of this game. This is going to be a conversation that, for me, I want to do with more and more creators and designers in this hobby space. It's not about your game specifically. It's about you. It's about both of your journeys into this space, why you wanted to explore and create something. I mean, you've done the art, the graphics, the aesthetic, the rulebook writing. Everything here except for the actual manufacturing and even the logistics around that you worked out.
Yeah.
So, hats off.
It's a journey.
Their game is not only beautifully made and responsibly done, but it's also fun.
Thank you.
It's not right for everyone. Doesn't have to be. That's okay. But hopefully we can make a few more people aware of what this game is.
Yeah.
So, there's a gameplay video. There's also probably going to be a preview video. I like celebrating things that are cool and made by, independent people. It's where I'm weak. Let's not get into your game. Who are you all?
Cool. So...
Johnny.
No, really.
Yeah.
I try to leave this question as an open-ended question because it is hard to pinpoint and ask questions of someone that puts them down in a funnel. And it's also a vulnerable question to ask. If you're asking for people to talk about their past, their history, who
Right.
they are. And so instead, I try to do more of an open-ended, who are you and who do you want the audience to know you as? Like, what's your history? Whether it is in board game-centric spaces altogether or not, how'd you all get to where you are now?
Yeah. So basically, Johnny and I, our family immigrated to the United States as refugees back in '91. I was born a month later, and Johnny 3 months later. No, I'm just kidding. 2 years later.
2 years. That'd be a complicated...
Yeah. But yeah, so basically, we grew up in Washington State in the beautiful woods out there. So having that upbringing, we honestly spent tons of times in the woods. We spent all of our time in the woods, and basically our parents threw out our TV. So our childhood literally was spent making games as an immigrant family. You're not going to go out and buy,
Sure.
whatever's out there.
Yeah.
And literally just playing in the woods. So that's where that originated from.
The idea of game creation, the love for...
Yeah.
What you said you didn't go out and purchase a lot of games, but are there games that you remember, either ones that you all created or games that you actually had that were produced that got you into the hobby of playing?
Go for it.
One specific. So we had never heard of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Only now do we find out
you
that
invented Dungeons and Dragons on your own. I hear you. I hear what you're
as
saying.
children, we would make up our characters and Daniel would draw them out completely because he was always been an incredible artist even as a kid. And he would outfit all the characters and then we would literally roll die and we would make up these stories and we'd give each other strengths and weaknesses and abilities and such and play out these stories. And then I grew up and find out, oh, people make money off of this. So maybe we can do that.
No, not this time.
Yeah, right.
Not
Yeah,
this time.
right.
The independent journey is an interesting, complicated one, and we're going to dive into that a little bit farther in this conversation. But I still want to focus on who you are. One of the things we realized, I didn't realize we knew each other, or had any contact with each other because it was the Lexington community that reached out. But then you showed up, and I was like, "You look familiar," and you were like, "Did you used to go to West Jesmond High School?"
Yeah.
We went to school together. Only for a brief period of time, and both of us were social outcasts and awkward in our own way. Me with Jesus freak written on the back of my sweater and almost no friends across the board. And you two said that you were a little bit more recluse and shy and nerds in school.
Yeah, silent.
So how has growing up influenced? Like you talked about the fact that growing up didn't really have a TV, focused on game design. How is that journey led to you wanting to kind of pursue an artistic expression? Being back here in Kentucky, like I'm just interested about the journey. What got you to this point?
Yeah, so basically, I guess one of the biggest things was because of the fact that I guess we had to rely so heavily on our imagination growing up. It really was something that we like carried with us. So even as, we aged and, got married, jobs, whatever else, just kind of like you're living life. For me, about 2 years ago, I just kind of like reached a point where I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm gifted with this talent and I'm not utilizing it to the best of my ability. So basically it just turned around to the point where I was like, honestly, like, that's it. Like, this is it. I'm gonna make the game that's always been on my mind. So of course I Googled it first. I was like, I want to make sure that this thing doesn't exist. And after that,
games about wolves where you try to become the leader of a pack.
Right.
No.
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I basically started looking into that and just realized, you know what? I want to make this for myself, for my family. We love game nights. My wife and I, we have a conservative collection, but if anybody knows us, they know that like most likely the way they've spent time with us is around our table playing a game. Yeah. So for us, it was just the thought of community, and that's what resonated with us once we did learn about you, was the fact of how much that matters to you. And growing up in that Ukrainian, Moldavian, Slavic community, that's something that we hold on to very tightly. It's why I'm able to have my brother alongside me this whole entire journey and have the trust that I do in him. If he says this doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if he says it's great, then I can trust him. So that's me. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah. I'd say a part of it was, like Daniel said, we grew up in a family of 8 kids. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
it's a good collection.
Right. Yeah.
So we did, spend a lot of time running around, using our imaginations. I know that even as like late teens, we were still running around the woods, like pretending to be animals, which was great. So yeah, like Daniel said, we've always had that in us. And then it's just incredible to finally make something so tangible that you can share with the world. Yeah.
Feel free to redirect or not answer the question if the question gets a little too personal, because we haven't really talked about it too much.
Yeah.
But I know for myself, part of the thing that board games has been for me, or this community has been for me, has been a refuge from my own social anxiety, insecurities, all of that. Like I have a really hard time connecting with groups of people. If you put me in a room and tell me to go like be a photographer and take a photo of every single person, I'm good at that. I've got a role, I've got a thing that I can follow. But if you put me in a room and say, go play game, go sit down at a table and find someone to play games with, I'll sit at a table by myself until someone comes up to me. So And part of the reason why I'm asking the question is you said in high school, both of you were pretty quiet and reserved, and off to the side. We're both a little bit older than high school now.
Yeah.
We both have dipped into the board game world in this community to some degree. It's clearly meant a lot to us. What is it for you about this space that allows you to connect to it? What about this space has been something that you want to be a part of? Where's that doorway that you went through that sort of crossed that line? I mean, that degree of self, like, for me, it's insecurity and isolation. I don't know what it is for you, and I wouldn't project, but does that make sense? It's open-ended, but
Right.
No, it makes sense, and I guess for us, part of our...
I think a lot of people share that. That's the reason why I'm asking. I would venture to guess the vast majority of board gamers share that experience or that feeling.
Yeah. And I'd agree with it. Like, it makes sense. Everybody has something that that draws them here, and I think it's that community aspect. For us, I'd say, or at least I guess I should speak for myself, is the fact that growing up, you're kind of like within this smaller, like, niche, like Slavic community where, the first language I learned was Russian, and then I go to school and,
Was it the first one you learned? Just the household language?
Yeah, and
interesting.
So then all of a sudden you're in this American culture where everybody talks about, things that are so different, where they talk about their dinner, and at home I'm having red borscht, which is like...
No one understands that.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of like, nobody gets it, and they're like, oh, we had lasagna, and I'm like, what's that? Like, so...
Well, Daddy opened up a pack of mac and cheese.
But, so, my parents, they definitely tried to, like, get us into the culture, but there was still this feeling of being the outsider. Like, you literally just feel like the outsider. And so I think that games, it's part of that escape of being able to, like, do something in this other world. And given that, like, we are blessed with, like, rich imaginations, it's always been easy for us to get into that.
I had no idea who you all were before you came over. And you all were able to do some research on me, and you knew me better. But I'll tell you this. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the game table I sit at, the door, the door that I open up, I just invite people who are interested. You could have been any religion, faith, sex, orientation, nationality. I had no idea. I knew one thing about you.
Right.
That was enough.
Yeah.
You're a gamer. You like board games. You like the idea of being together. You spent time and passion on designing something. Something about this community and culture has infected you enough that you care about a shared interest. And there's something about sitting around a table and that idea of a social gathering and that communal environment that I don't care who's on the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me nervous.
Yeah.
Because there's already such a strong foundation that I have that, like, I think that's cool. I've got one more question about your history, your upbringing, and everything, and then I want to get to board games and talking about your experience with them, and then the journey into this Kickstarter space. When it comes from the way that you were raised, you talked about having kind of two cultures and two communities that you associate with that you're both very proud of. What is, in your sense, the difference between those, or the what have you noticed when it comes to sort of the American culture and then your immigrant community that you were raised in?
Oh man, that's a big question.
It's a big question.
There's a lot.
And I'm asking this selfishly because I'm just fascinated by the conversation.
Oh man, I don't want to, because it's easy to take a stance where it's like bashing one.
Don't bash.
And
I'm more interested in positives. I'm more interested in your observations.
I'll say
because you we talked earlier, and you're both brag about and are proud of both.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And that's the funny thing is a lot of times it feels like when you do talk about one versus the other, it's like Johnny said, like you feel like to say you like one, you're bashing on the other, which
it's this
of course it isn't.
Pull.
It isn't true. And I think the reality is, like, say for example, America is this melting pot. Like, it's just this really, really cool cultural, like, experience. And so in a way we do find refuge there. It's really cool about that. However, at the same time, within our Slavic community, it's almost funny because my dad, he's not even like he's not fully Slavic, I guess. He's Moldavian, which is it's essentially, if you have no idea where it is, it's tiny country in Eastern Europe, and it's Latin based. So it's essentially Romanian, Italian, and all that.
Yeah.
And so his family and everybody, they're very like bubbly and very just like culturally, they're just like they wear their emotions on their face.
Yeah.
And they're loud. And then on my mom's side of the family, it's very much so this stoic kind of like, oh, I've seen you. I know who you are. You're the guy that fought Rocky. Like, you know, like you're this, you know, you're the bad guy in the movies. And so it's terrible to have that analogy almost, but it's hilarious for us because, you know, we come from it and we understand, you know, that we love those aspects of it. Like,
Yeah.
Johnny, what were you thinking? Yeah.
So I will say one thing about the Slavic community that has always been such an amazing thing is just the sense of unity that's already built in there. There's a sense of belonging and community that remains there, and it's, I think, in large part due to the fact that it's a community that has been, you know, transplanted into a different space. And so obviously you're going to find, you know, refuge in that. But at the same time, it's also just, I think also in the Slavic culture in and of itself, there's a huge emphasis on a communal aspect of living together and caring for each other and stuff like that. So for me, that's been a huge thing to carry over. And seeing like the board game community and just, I'm pretty new to it, in all honesty, just the past couple of years. Daniel was in it before me, but coming into it and seeing like, wow, these people are like tight knit. Like these people care for each other and they're like, they band together around things. And there's not much of a sense of competition of like climbing over each other to become better than the other. So that's been cool to see and kind of compare between my upbringing and this awesome community.
So board games.
ooh.
And a board game. You talked about your journey into board games, but where did that start bridging over into the wider hobby space? From your own imagination, you invented Dungeons and Dragons to, I should really title the video like an interview with the inventors of Dungeons and Dragons. Where did it, before we get to your game, where did you start finding out about the wider board game world? Like what was both of your first introduction games?
Yeah, so I think everybody grows up with literally like you're gonna have access to Monopoly, no matter who you are. You will have access to Monopoly.
What a bad first access game,
right? But
and I apologize if you like Monopoly.
I don't.
But it's not designed to be fun.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what it does is the mindset of what can I do to make this better. Literally, I think that's what drove us forward. Because we couldn't sit down and play a game with Risk without being like, I love this. It's all we have. But what can we do to improve upon this? Yeah. And I think that's consistently been a part of our journey into that, to where it was just like we had the generic games and then all of a sudden it was like, what can I do? What can I do?
If you had to determine, what was your first that you would describe modern board game?
I'd say Catan.
Catan?
Yeah.
That was
Catan as well.
You just always follow. You guys are unified in all of this.
And like I said before, I came into it after Daniel.
Yeah.
Like they built this collection and stuff, and I would come to their house and play games that they bought.
So where are you now? If you had to list 3 games that like you'd be heartbroken if they left your collection and you couldn't get another copy. Where in terms of your experience as a board gamer?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll say right off the top, my friend Max. Shout out Max.
Shout out Max.
Yeah, just kidding.
Yeah.
He has no social media that I know of, so it doesn't matter.
It's all right. He'll appreciate the shout out nonetheless.
Right? No.
Max would probably want you to back their game.
Yeah, Max. No, Max has.
I'm saying Max would probably want the audience.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So Max introduced my wife Angela and I to a game called Arabian Nights, which was a blast. We looked it up. We can't afford it. So literally this game for us is like the thing we're like, okay, this is going to be the next game that we get. I'd say that's the big one.
Yeah.
Outside of that, goodness, this is almost like a cheesy one, but I genuinely have always appreciated Bang the Dice game.
Okay.
I will always mention it because of the fact that the way that it makes you feel in a group setting and the fact that I can bring it and introduce literally anybody to it
Sure.
for a fun social time, I love it for that. But finally, I would say something else that made me feel like kind of like, wow, like the art world in gaming is so cool was really Scythe. Like you look at Scythe and you're immediately like, you'll stop and you're like, okay, I need
Beautiful
to.
game.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And so I think that was the propellant for us to really just be like, man, like, and I don't want to say, oh, I can draw that, but like from the perspective of like, oh my goodness, that's gorgeous. Like, I want to share something too.
Yeah.
So I would say that for me, it's those three.
I'm a huge sucker for social deduction games.
Okay.
Like anything social deduction, I'm there. It's always been my favorite theme. And so my favorites are Bang,
Sure.
Secret Hitler.
Okay.
And then recently got Resistance.
Avalon.
I haven't played Avalon.
Okay.
But I wasn't the biggest fan of Resistance specifically. But Secret Hitler, Bang, and then recently Tsuro, which isn't social deduction. That's a little.
No.
But
Yeah,
I
not at all.
loved
It's a lovely game.
Tsuro.
Though.
Like it was so simple, but the way that kind of like how Daniel's talking about Bang, how it kind of like brings you into that world, it just really like enveloped me, and I was like, wow, for some reason I just really like this.
How did you get here?
To
We got a physical prototype.
Yeah.
There's an active Kickstarter.
what it took, a whole lot of grit. First and foremost, when I had
You're very stubborn.
You're right. Yeah. And I'll say this: my wife Angela. Okay, so many of you are going to relate to this. One person in the relationship being like, "I have this idea," and then all of a sudden your spouse or like, "What? No, not again." And with Badland, it was like us walking our dog Archie, and I was like, Angela, like, and I held off to tell her until I had done my homework. And so about 2 weeks into like literally like really like diligent work on it, I was like, Angela, like I have this idea, and I, pitched it to her, and she was like, that's actually really cool. That's a good idea. And I basically concluded with, I've already started on it, and I'm gonna see this one through. So that was it. And basically the rest of it was a long journey of, given we had kind of like the concept from day one, it was like playtesting was easy, getting people to want to play it. We already had our core, which was a ton of fun. And then artwork, literally draw, redraw, draw, redraw. Literally, I actually went through the whole entire thing, having drawn it, and then I was like, I don't like it. I'm going to start again. And so...
The aesthetics that you settled on are so nice.
Thank you. And it was such a thrill to get there.
What has been the best part of this journey?
Honestly, I would say the fact of like, we had like a little family gathering, and everything leading up to that point was, I'm doing this. I'm like, basically like I'm marking all the checkpoints, like every aspect. It's so fun. All of those aspects it's a blast, but some things are hard. You get over it. And it wasn't until that like my family and everybody like were gathered together, and I realized that all of the people there are literally gathered because this thing I told them I was going to do after all this time is now in front of them. And I realized in that moment that it was something that I will never be able to recapture that feeling, but it was just this sense of accomplishment, not from the perspective of like, everybody look at me, but literally up until that moment, that didn't like, I didn't realize how much grit it took me to get there until I was looking at the other side of it.
It was like a breath.
Yeah.
It's like you could exhale a little bit. The way that you described the community and the culture that you grew up in gives me, even though I can't feel that same experience, but it gives me context for what that meant for this community that you grew up around, this family that has always spent time playing and gathering, and to have all of them gathered for you and for this thing that you'd been talking about. Had to be such a cool moment.
Literally, I felt like it was my funeral, like my memorial service.
Such a cool moment. Still.
Yeah.
What's been the worst part of this journey so far?
Oh man. The
All of the late nights, all of the work. Like, it
Yeah.
takes so... I mean, the amount of work that I put into it is nothing compared to Daniel. And I'm sitting here like, man, the amount of time it takes to put something like this together is unreal. Like, and we knew it was going to be a lot going into it. And I was telling Daniel I remember telling him in the beginning, like, hey, like, I'm with you, but this is going to take a lot. And I was like, I just want, because I didn't know if he was kind of just in a fanciful kind of like, I want to make a board game.
Up in the sky.
And I was like, this is going to take a lot. And it's taken even more than I could have thought it would, but seeing it is amazing.
Throw away the idea of making money, success, whatever's next, right? Like, was getting to this point, that family gathering, that moment, was that worth what it took to get there?
1,000 times over, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say as well.
Literally, like, we started with the idea of making a game for our friends. Like, for it, like, I wasn't that aware even that, like, I'd be able to, like, do something to introduce it to, like, the world. It was literally to be like, to our friends and family, let's gather around the table, and
I love that, though.
that was it. So it's cool.
What's been the biggest, and you might have a good answer for this, because I know you've been playtesting and cutting things out of his beloved projects. One of the hard things that new designers face is it is so easy to want to include everything that you love. It is very hard to listen, and very few people have a brother that they can trust to the point where you said, if he says this is cut, I can't question it. Because I know his advice is for my own benefit. I know it's true, and if we don't both match up on this thing, then the odds of it probably not being the right fit for what we're working on isn't there. What's been the hardest thing in this process to remove or cut or sacrifice in this thing that you both care about?
I'm trying to remember on if there was a specific, because it's been such a long journey of
sure.
cutting, recutting, coming back to the drawing board. Like, Daniel, and the cool part is that Daniel would have these ideas, not coming from a mechanic standpoint, but he'd come from like the world he was trying to create, a wolf pack standpoint, or like the Shakespearean dramas of like Macbeth, this like struggle between like kings trying to gain power, and he would, in that world, think of like, how could I make people, how could I turn this into an actual like thing that becomes a mechanic? So there's just so many things that had to be reworked. I don't know if I could point out a single one because there were so many. But probably looking back, like the actual, and he did a lot of like all of the work on this, but the exact like things that cards would specifically do, and kind of play, because then you'd have to play test it and see like, does this actually work? Does this actually make you feel the way that it's supposed to? And then revamping it, changing one specific thing about the outcome of a certain card could change the whole dynamic of the whole game. And so there's been many, many cards that I know have been changed throughout that process, but I can't pinpoint a specific one.
Yeah. I would say for me, the funniest thing that like I had to change and I had to get over immediately is my very first playthrough. I don't know why I thought this, but my idea was you have to get the loyalties of everybody and you have to get all of them. And that's how I dove into it. And I was like, it literally logically makes no sense.
No.
How long did it even take?
It's literally impossible.
Like
it was
hours.
literally 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
And all of a sudden I'm like,
Worst game ever.
Wait a minute.
wait, like it was like, it obviously doesn't make sense, but I think that's part of it, is because you can get so enraptured with like what you're doing is you need a fresh perspective that says, hold on a second. Like with a painting, it's kind of like I could sit there all day and then my wife will walk in 1 second and say that nose is off or whatever else.
And you
then
immediately see it.
Yeah. And up until that moment I didn't. So I think that was the funniest one to me because it was so
great.
glaring.
So We don't have too much longer. It is freezing rain outside, and we want to get you both home safely. Talk about. So we'd talked a little bit off camera about your experience as brand new indie content creators or indie, publishers, I guess, in a sense. And one of the things from a content creator side is how do I as Quackalope, I feel like I have a responsibility to not only create content on the newest hotness, the best games possible, but also figure out a way to leave the door open so that indie designers and creators and people who are doing this for the love of the community, no matter how big we are able in some way to get our attention and potentially get on the channel. Again, the bar gets higher and harder the larger we get. Not only because time and resource and attention costs something, it costs something from everyone involved, but also because the more of an audience that we have, the more I have a responsibility to them to only introduce things that they will like. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want is for 20 or 30 or even one person that watches this video or watches any of our videos, the last thing I want is for them to get your game and not like it. For two reasons. One, because I want them to enjoy the stuff they get. I want them to invest their money wisely. Two, you don't want someone who the game isn't right for to have it sitting on their table. That sucks for you as a designer as well. We talked about your experience as content creators, or not as content creators. We talked about your experience as designers and new publishers and new Kickstarters. And I suppose you are creating content in a way, but how open has that door been? What has been the experience so far of taking something that you've created and then trying to bring it to market?
Yeah, so with it, I would say that there were some big wins and some big losses. Getting into it, it really felt like the doors of the community were actually closed, and it was a matter of like finding ways to pry them open. It's almost like hearing about a birthday party that you weren't invited to. And
I love those. Those are my favorite birthday parties. The ones that I know have ice cream cake, but I don't have an invitation. I'm showing up somehow.
Yeah. And you're like, oh my goodness, like you get that feeling, and it really isn't that. But at the same time, like it makes it difficult to know which are the right moves. Another thing is there's so much great content out there to be able to like learn from. So it's like definitely pick up everything you can, like literally like everything that you can, read it, learn from it, hear the podcasts. But as soon as we started getting into the space, we realized that like reasonably so, like everybody like needs to like not everybody, but like a lot of people that like they need something out of it. And if you're making something for the first time with no budget, you're really...
Everything is costing you something.
Yeah. And there comes a point where it's like, you can't afford this, and the community then, the door becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And the realization for us was all of a sudden like, literally finding people that all of a sudden were like, you know what, I do want to help you. Like I literally from Greece, we had Babylon Games that was like, hey, games, they never make it out here. They always get lost in the mail. And I was like, I will try to send you one if you will take it. And he's like, by all means, give it a shot. And sure enough, he got it. And it was just like one of those things where it's like, sometimes you just gotta go further than you think that you had to go. And I would say that like any expectation that you have, like anybody that says no, you just have to go knock on 10 more doors, like, and you'll find that person. But it is hard. Like it is hard.
How, from your side of things, how can I, and I'm asking this about myself, despite the fact that, word of mouth led to you all being here, but I don't feel like it's fair to have you critique other content creators or other people you've interacted with. So assume that I responded in the way that some of them did, right? And how can I, approaching and working with people in the future, what can I do to be more receptive and more open to inviting people into the space, right? like trying on my best from the other side of the door to like pry it open so that more so that more people from a variety of different communities, a variety of different cultures and backgrounds, and just a diversity of people can feel like they're part of this community. What can we do to emphasize that?
I'd say the biggest thing has been actually responding. There have been some, content creators, some avenues that we've tried and poked at where it's just no response. Or the response is there and then it just disappears. And it's understandable that it's like a lot of these content creators have a lot of things to do, a lot of things on their plate. But if just that were to change, if just that were to be like, hey, we're gonna work on being actually responsive to people and actually willing to have a conversation instead of maybe writing something off immediately, or just because that could be the difference between two people making it or breaking it. Just one because one connection leads to the next and the next and the next. But if those doors aren't even open, then it's hard to make anything of it.
Yeah, and I think because of the fact that it's so cool to see like literally like content creators, how much they strive to actually benefit the community. So it's like for us, we understand you're busy. We also understand how many people want to make a game.
Sure.
And how many people will reach out to you to say, not even the fact to show them a game, but just to be like, I have this idea. Like
It's one of my closest friends turned you down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I believe he probably looked at it and thought that maybe it wasn't the right game or right fit for it,
Yeah.
which is fine. I don't
Exactly.
begrudge him for it.
Yeah.
It may be the right decision on his part. I'm on the other end of that. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
Right? It is a weird balance. And there are gut check judgment calls being made all the time.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to me to try to hear what would have been the difference for a group or for a community or for, and I'm hoping a few years down the road we can be having another conversation where we have your fully produced game in front of us, which is already funded on Kickstarter, by the way. You're not risking anything to join in. Your fully produced game in front of us, maybe something else that you've worked on out of the machinations of your all's collaboration, and maybe some different art projects or things that you've been able to experiment with or explore. And the conversation will be different. Instead of talking about working your way through that door, you can talk about what was the difference, like what made the difference in that journey. So hopefully we can be there, and I look forward to that conversation.
Yeah. The future's ahead of us.
Yeah. So with that, we're gonna get you both on the road. I appreciate you swinging by and taking the time to show this off to me and play it with me, especially considering there's only about 16 days as of recording this left on your campaign, probably less by the time this is going up. This is fun. This has been not only a cool reconnection from high school, because I've changed so much since high school. I think we all have. I think it's a journey that people go on, but like
I lost a finger.
yeah, well, it's a factor. Listen, it has been life has been such an interesting journey, and I have very few people from high school that I'm still in contact with. But it is very interesting, and it's from me sort of a proud moment to have someone that like recognized me and remembered me. For me to be like, I'm still here. Like I'm still like I'm a functioning human being. Like I made it, somewhere. So this has been cool. I'm looking forward to the next time we get to sit down and play games together. I am moving to Maryland very soon, and I have already told you that the door's wide open for you all and for anyone else out there watching. The reality of the state of the world right now is, we have to meet and gather in a responsible fashion, making sure that we are aware of who people have been in contact with, what everyone's degree to risk is, and of course limiting the amount of people we see from time to time. But I'm hoping that by the end of the year, when the world opens up back fully, we'll be at a point where literally I can just give someone a phone number or just give a public phone number out and be like, if you want to come play games and connect and gather, just text this number, right?
Yeah.
So.
Looking forward to better days.
Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, let me know. Hopefully we'll be able to have more of them with more creators and more people down the road. Whatever the case, though, Thank you for allowing me to be part of your community. I'll see you next time.